Why do some scenes feel violent even when nobody raised their voice? Why can two characters sit at a table and talk politely for 3 minutes and it feels like the audience just witnessed a war? How is it that sometimes you can hear the power struggles in the silence between the lines? And why do other scenes, even with dialogue that should be good on paper, feel like information gets exchanged, everyone stays basically the same, and the story just sort of continues? Because in a lot of flat scenes, the writer only built one objective. The character wants a thing, the key, the information, the vote, the plan, and the scene becomes a delivery mechanism. But the scenes that build tension all the way through are built differently. They're not running on one objective, they're running on 3 at the same time. In this video, the focus isn't on how to write dialogue or how to make conflict. It's how to build scenes that create conflict automatically, where every line has pressure, every beat forces a choice, and even a quiet conversation leaves damage. I'm going to break down what I like to call the 3-layer objective system, and then show you how to weaponize it into subtext, tactical shifts, dilemmas, and endings that create real momentum instead of reset. So, why do scenes fall flat? A lot of weak scenes are built like this: objective, obstacle, outcome. And that's not wrong, it's just incomplete. Because if the only objective is external, such as get the information, then the scene becomes purely logistical. It's clean, efficient, but forgettable. You've probably heard the classic rule that a scene should do at least 1 or 2 of 3 jobs: advance the plot, deepen the characters, or build a world. Because if a scene does none of those, then it has no purpose being in your story. And that's true, but that's not what today's video is about. Today's about why a scene can technically do those jobs and still fall flat, and how to make the scene generate pressure moment by moment using the 3-layer objective system. If you guys want, I can make a separate video on scene function and how to tell when a scene truly earned its place in the story. You can let me know in the comments, or I can post a poll, but there's a lot to cover in this topic and I want to make it as comprehensible as possible. So let's start with the golden standard. A strong scene does 3 things at once. There's an external objective, the plot, so what the characters need to get done; a relational objective, the social, what the character needs the other person to feel, grant, or admit; and the self-image objective, the identity, what the character needs to be true about themselves to survive the moment. So again, external, social, identity. And here's the key that makes it a real engine. They can't win all 3 at once, so the scene becomes a trade: a win that costs something, a success that creates fallout, and a moment that can't be taken back. So part 1, the 3 layers. The first layer, like we mentioned, is the external objective. This is like the plot currency. It's the concrete outcome that changes the situation in the story world. Something you can point to and say the scene is different now. This can be get the information, secure a resource, escape a tight situation, recruit someone, hide evidence, buy time, or force a decision. This is what most writers already do. It's the reason the scene was created in the first place. Layer 2, relational objective. This is the social currency. It's what they want from the other person socially, what they're trying to shift in the relationship. It can be how they want to be perceived, things they want to gain, like trust, respect, forgiveness, fear, admiration, obedience, loyalty, distance, or intimacy. It could be things they want to avoid, like suspicion, shame, being controlled, being dismissed, exposed, or losing status. Or it can be things they want to inflict: punishment, a test, cornering someone, recruiting someone, exposing them, humiliating them, inflicting dominance, or forcing an apology. And this is where subtext starts. Subtext is what a character is trying to accomplish socially or emotionally that they can't say directly. It's a gap between what they're talking about, the topic, and what they're really negotiating: power, trust, identity. For example, in House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones, characters rarely say, "I want power over you." They talk about duty, family, tradition, safety, while the real objective is status and leverage. In layer 3, the self-image objective, so the identity currency. This is what the character is trying to protect about who they are, what they need to remain true, so they can live with themselves after the scene. It can be, I'm not weak, I'm a good person, I'm in control, I'm not like them, I'm needed, I'm the competent one. This layer is why a scene explodes over something small, because the surface request isn't the real threat. The identity underneath is. Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender is a great example of this, because his external objective keeps changing, but his relational and identity objectives stay welded in honor for a long time, so every scene feels loaded. In the first season, his external objective, or the plot, is to capture the Avatar and bring him back. It's to track information, secure transport, win fights, or recover leads. His relational objective, the social, is to regain his father's approval, and secondarily command respect from his crew or rivals. It's not to be seen as a disgraced exile and reassert status. His identity layer is to prove he's not a failure, he's worthy, he has honor. Or the hidden painful version, if I don't do this, then my father was right about me. And this is a spoiler, so you can skip to this timestamp. But by season 3, his triangle flips, which is why his scenes feel like identity warfare. His external objective is to stop chasing the avatar, to survive politically, and later to help Aang win. His practical goal shifts from capture to atone, train, and fight the Fire Nation. His relational objective is to earn trust from the protagonist and repair the bonds he damaged. He also wants to redefine his relationship to his father and sister, not approval, but escape, control, resistance. And his self-image objective, or his identity, is to prove my honor is mine to define, and I can be good without being weak. I can choose the right thing and still be somebody. So the character stays Zuko, but the meaning of winning changes, and his scene pressure changes with it. Note that these layers and what I'll be talking about in the rest of the video applies best for the following types of scenes: negotiation, persuasion, apology, planning, confrontational, asking scenes like requests, favors, or forgiveness, and many alliance scenes, even friendly ones. But it's less relevant for scenes that are pure action choreography or pure atmosphere or travel montage scenes, unless there's a relational or identity undercurrent. Part 2, objective versus tactic versus beat, so that it stops being a theory. Once you understand the 3 layers, the next question is, how do you make them move on the page, line by line, without the scene feeling static? This is where these 3 terms matter. The objective is what they want, the triangle, so the external, relational, and identity. The tactic is how they try to get it, so the move they make. And the beat is when the tactic shifts because the pressure changes. If a scene has no beat changes, that often means that nobody's truly resisting, or the resistance isn't attacking anything that matters. So the character is getting what they want too easily. Tactic changes are usually when the scene becomes watchable. A beat is basically, they try one approach, it fails, so they switch tactics. If the character keeps using the same approach the entire scene, the scene often feels emotionally flat. This can be shifting tactics from charm to reasoning, bargaining, guilt, threat, vulnerability, and an ultimatum. But we'll go over these in the tactic ladder in part 4. Part 3, building the engine, the triangle method. The first step is to write the triangle. The external, I want, the relational, I want you to, or I want you to see me as, and the identity, what I need to prove to myself. And the identity one should feel slightly uncomfortable when voiced plainly. That's usually how you know that it's real. Step 2, add the can't win all 3 constraint. Ask, if they win externally, what relational damage happens? If they preserve the relationship, what external cost happens? If they protect their pride or self-image, what do they lose externally? This is how you build scenes that don't rely on random drama. The drama is structural. Step 3, give the other characters their own triangle, so the conflict matrix. Scenes get sharp when characters line on one layer but clash in another. For example, both characters want the plan to work, so they have external alignment, but both want to be the leader, so there's a relational clash. And both need to see themselves as a responsible one, so an identity clash. And now even agreement feels like conflict. And in part 5, when all these tools come together, I'll show you a very clear example of triangles clashing. Which brings us to part 4, weaponizing it. Turning the triangle into pressure. And here are 10 levers that you can use to make scenes hold pressure. Lever 1, cross-purpose inside cooperation. A scene doesn't need enemies, it needs mismatched agendas. This lever is especially useful for alliance scenes, team planning, friends coordinating, mentor and student talks, couples resolving an issue, or we agree on the mission conversations. Cross-purpose means the same external goal, but a different social victory condition, such as both characters want the plan to work, one character wants to feel trusted and included, but the other wants to feel in control and unchallenged, so they agree while stepping on each other the entire time. Lever 2, give the scene leverage. Otherwise, it just becomes polite talking. Every strong scene has a weapon on the table. Information asymmetry, gatekeeping access, status or rank, time pressure, emotional debt, or moral leverage. Like, if you don't help, you're complicit. If nobody has leverage, nobody can pressure anyone. And if nobody can pressure anyone, the scene stays polite and weightless. Again, you constantly see this in Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. Lever 3, make at least one layer unsaid, so the subtext. If all 3 objectives are spoken out loud, the scene gets blunt. A common pattern in strong scenes is the external is explicit, the relational is implied, and the identity is denied. An identity mask like I'm fine is often the loudest line in the scene, like in House of the Dragon in the Green Council episode, where on paper it's about deciding the succession plan, but moment to moment it's actually about control, betrayal, and competing claims of I'm doing what's necessary. So there's great contrast between the plot function and the scene pressure. Lever 4, put the real fight into framing, not the topic. Sometimes the topic is logistics, money, plans, or timing, but the meaning is relational or identity. Characters argue about logistics while fighting about trust, respect, dominance, betrayal, fear of abandonment, fear of being powerless. So the real conflict is hidden inside who gets to decide, who's trusted, who's forgiven, who's seen as competent, and who's being controlled. The topic is what they're allowed to talk about. The framing is what they're actually negotiating. So you can have a scene about a plan that's secretly a scene about respect. After writing a scene, ask, what did they say they fought about, but what were they actually fighting about? If you can't name the second one, the scene often risks not carrying real weight. Again, like in Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, in the small council scenes, policy conversations are framing wars. Who's listened to, who's dismissed, and who gets to speak for the realm. Lever 5, aim resistance at the most sensitive layer. Weak resistance blocks the external goal. No, I won't help, but strong resistance attacks identity and relationship. Why should I trust you again when you always end up leaving? Now the scene becomes personal without needing yelling. The resistance isn't necessarily, no you can't. It can be, you're irresponsible, you don't understand duty. When Viserys and Rhaenyra fight in House of the Dragon, the resistance isn't no, it's you're irresponsible, you don't understand duty. Attacking her identity as heir and the relational standing simultaneously. Lever 6, the tactics ladder. This is a planning tool for scene beats that answers. When the character's first approach fails, what do they try next? And what does that escalation cost them? It's how you escalate scenes. A tactics ladder is a ranked list of methods your character might use to pursue their objectives, ordered from least socially or identity expensive, so it's safe, deniable, polite, to most expensive, revealing, coercive, and bridge burning. It doesn't mean they have to use all these layers. It's just a ranked list of methods the character might use in the scene, from lowest cost to highest cost. So as the scene progresses and resistance hits, the character is forced to climb. So the ladder creates beats, each rung is a new beat. Escalation, pressure rises without needing explosions. And trade-offs, each escalation pays with a different layer. One way it can look like is they start with a polite ask or using their internal charm. Charm protects the relationship, protects identity, but might fail externally. Basically, it's a casual ask, like, can you cover for me? When this fails, they try to bargain with logic, trying to make their ask seem mutually beneficial for both parties. Reasoning spends relational warmth to gain external progress. Basically, it's a reasonable explanation, like, it's just this one time, or you can benefit from this too. Then they'll shift to emotional leverage number 1, bonding, like, I wouldn't ask anyone else. The fourth rung of the ladder can be guilt or moral pressure, which spends a relationship, such as via resentment, in order to force cooperation, like, you know what I'm dealing with. Then they can shift to threats and coercion, and then vulnerability. They can revert to using a vulnerable truth about themselves. This is another kind of emotional leverage, but this time it costs a character social or identity damage, such as, I messed up. Then finally, if all else fails, they can use an ultimatum, a move that burns bridges. This is one last desperate recourse where nothing else matters besides accomplishing the task at hand. Each rung should cost something in one of the layers, plot-wise, social, or identity. The cost is what makes the escalation feel earned and creates tension that continues well after the scene is over. You still have one triangle per character, external, relational, and identity, and the tactics ladder is just the different tools they use to try to win that triangle. Each rung tends to spend one layer to protect another. You're building one escalation path where each step shifts which layer is being sacrificed. A concrete example from Arcane is a conversation between Silco and Jace. For context, this is when Jace secretly meets Silco to negotiate peace in order to prevent a war he doesn't want to keep fueling. What's initially at stake here is Zaun's independence and the potential war, before the cost becomes personal for Silco. Jace's triangle here is the external, secure a peace deal or independence agreement that ends a war. The relational is to be taken seriously as a leader, not a naive kid playing politics. And the identity is to be the good leader who doesn't become a butcher to win. Now here's how Jace climbs the ladder as resistance hits. His first tactic is diplomatic posture. He begins by treating the conversation like a formal negotiation. The cost is low since he wants to keep his dignity in control, but resistance hits since Silco doesn't give real ground unless Jace proves leverage. Silco sees through him, not viewing Jace as a real threat, but plays along. So Jace shifts to tactic 2. He goes for a logical offer that shows mutual benefit. He tries to bargain with moral or an ideal appeal, framing peace as a right outcome and not just a trade. The cost is a relational risk, since it can read like naive or preachy in front of Silco, but Silco doesn't run on morality. He runs on power and loyalty, so in turn, Silco gives Jace a list of his own demands, which Jace views as ridiculously high, so he shifts to the next tactic. For him, bonding as an emotional leverage won't work, so he moves to threats. Tactic number 3 is a show of force framing. He makes it clear that he can escalate. The war is on the table, telling Silco that his people wouldn't stand a chance. The cost here is to Jace's identity, because he's forced to step away from the good leader role he wanted to maintain. Now Silco respects force, but now Jace is closer to the thing he feared becoming. But Silco doesn't budge, saying that these are his terms. So given personality factors, Jace concedes, but offers terms of his own. The cost is external, since Jace spends political capital, yet his identity risk recovers as he can still frame himself internally as a moral and good leader. But then Jace offers an ultimatum. He introduces a non-negotiable price. Jinx. This is the rung when the scene turns. The cost is relational since it's an insult and a threat to Silco's loyalty, and its identity since Jace chooses necessary cruelty even when Silco resists. Silco's counterladder here and why the scene heightens in tension without any shouting is, he begins in negotiating mode, but the moment the demand is to turn over his daughter, he's forced into reframing, making it sound unreasonable, stalling, buying time, avoiding commitment, and eventually, even though he doesn't voice it out loud, there's a boundary or an ultimatum that he has to choose internally. The refusal isn't tactical, it's identity. And his hesitation in the next scene is what leads to the climax of the first season. The scene doesn't escalate because anyone gets louder, it escalates because the first tactic stops working, so they're forced to climb into the tactics that cost them pride, trust, or self-respect. The latter in the scene is controlled and political, status, leverage, and moral cost. And in part 5, we'll go over the final scene in season 1, where we can see a well-defined emotional and identity ladder where all 10 levers apply. But to clarify, you don't use all these rungs in every scene. Think of it like this. Every scene should have some sense of method, resistance, and method change. But the ladder can be 2 rungs, so a small scene, or it can be 6 or 7 rungs, so a major confrontation. Some scenes are intentionally low escalation, but even those usually have micro ladders, like deflecting, then joking, a partial truth, then a real truth. If there's 0 ladder, so no change in tactic, it often means the scene is just delivery, agreement, or exposition with no pressure. A quick way to do this is, step 1, decide what the character is not willing to pay yet. This is the ceiling early on. I won't beg, I won't threaten, I won't admit I'm scared. That's identity or relational protection. Step 2, list 3 to 8 plausible tactics that they could use in this situation. Not a generic be persuasive, but actual moves like charm, appeal to fairness, appeal to shared history, bargaining, guilt, lying, intimidation, confession, calling in a debt, public pressure, or removing choice. Step 3, rank them by cost. Cost can be external cost, like time, resources, risk, or exposure, relational costs, such as damaging trust, creating resentment, flipping power, and identity cost, humiliation, self-betrayal, admitting need, or breaking a personal code. Step 4, write the pressure triggers that pushes the character up the ladder. A tactic changes because something happens. The other person says no, time runs out, new information appears, the other person counters with leverage of their own, or the character's mask starts slipping. This is what makes escalation feel inevitable instead of random. A tactic ladder is the difference between a scene that talks and a scene that moves, because it forces method change, so the beats, rising price tags, so the trade-offs, and a result that isn't clean. Lever 7, put identity on a timer. Make them perform under pressure. Identity objectives get sharp when time is short. The character can't process, they can only react, they have to choose a mask quickly, and under that time pressure, their best self usually collapses first. Deadlines turn personality into action, because deadlines force the characters to pick which layer they're sacrificing right now. Lever 8, force a trade. The win must cost another layer. This is the core of weaponizing the triangle. It's why the 3-layer system works. For example, to get the information they need, they have to admit they were wrong, so an identity cost. To keep the peace, they have to let the other person believe a lie, so identity or relational depending on the character's values. To be respected, they have to say something cruelly honest, humiliating the other person in the process, so relational cost. Or to protect pride, they walk away and lose the external outcome, so an identity win but an external cost. And a more toned down or subtle example can be, a friend needs help moving apartments, so that's the external layer. Relationally, they want to seem easygoing and not needy. Identity-wise, they need to believe I'm independent. The trade is they can get help only if they lose the identity layer, if they drop the I'm fine act and ask directly, so an identity cost. Another relationship shifts because the need has been revealed. A clean win often reads as fake because it doesn't cost anything meaningful. Lever 9, design a split outcome. Aim for results like external win but relational loss, relational win but identity loss, identity win but external loss. That pattern creates the aftertaste the viewers remember. Lever 10, end with a new constraint. This is momentum, not just new information or a reset. A scene ending should update the 3 layers. Externally, what changed in the situation? Relationally, what changed between the characters? Debt, mistrust, intimacy, fear. And identity-wise, what changed inside the character? Shame, justification, resolve, fracture. This is how scenes stack into momentum instead of resetting. Part 5, a beat map example. This is the final scene from Arcane Season 1, so if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to this timestamp. So, Jinx's tea party. This is where all the rules and levers come into play. There are 3 layers overall. The external objectives are high stakes, so who gets chosen, what decision gets made, and who leaves alive. And you can see the relational objective underneath every line. Love, loyalty, betrayal. And the identity objectives are the real core of the scene. It's Powder versus Jinx, being chosen versus abandoned. And there are three major characters in this scene: Jinx, Vi, and Silco. The three layers for Jinx are her external objective, so forcing a final decision, removing uncertainty, and stopping her internal split by making the world choose. Her relational objective is to be chosen absolutely. She wants no hesitation and no divided loyalty. Her identity objective is to decide whether she'll become Powder again or whether she'll cement into Jinx. This depends on Vi's answer. She wants her sister to tell her who she is. For Vi, the external objective is to get Jinx out, to stop the violence, to save her, but she also wants to keep Caitlyn alive. Her relational objective is to rebuild trust and closeness, to be believed, to be let back in. Her identity objective is to not abandon her sister again, to believe that she's still Jinx's protector. For Silco, the third major force of the scene, his external objective is to keep Jinx on his side and keep control of the conflict. His relational objective is to remain as Jinx's primary bond, to be the one that she chooses. And his identity objective is, I built her, I'm not losing her, and I'm not replaceable. Through the different triangles of these three characters, we can see lever 1, cross-purpose and side cooperation, through their mismatched agendas. But we'll go over the beats and tactic escalations first, and then I'll show you how each of the 10 levers are used in the scene. The scene is basically Jinx climbing and forcing others to climb. Beat 1, the performance of control. Her tactic is a theatrical setup. She hosts like she's calm and in charge. What it does is establish relational hierarchy. I set the rules here, and mask her identity chaos. Beat 2, reframing the situation into a test. Tactic becomes turning the conversation into a loyalty trial. The resistance is Vi tries softness and reassurance, like come with me energy. But Jinx wants Vi to choose only her and not Caitlyn. She won't allow reassurance as an exit. She wants it to be converted into proof. So beat 3, targeting the relational layer through a rival presence, Caitlyn. The tactic is to make the triangle visible. Caitlyn isn't just a person, she's evidence. What the audience can clearly hear, but isn't said out loud, is Jinx telling her sister, you replaced me. This is subtext because Jinx doesn't have to state the fear for the audience to understand. It's visible under every dialogue line. Beat 4, escalation through threat. The leverage moves from emotional to lethal. Jinx's tactic is forcing compliance with danger. What it costs is relational trust collapses further, but it gives Jinx control of pace. This is a ladder climbing from talking it out to threatening an answer out. Beat 5, identity rupture. Forcing names and forcing a label. Her tactic becomes demand a defining statement. This is a high cost because it's not about information, it's about identity assignment, Jinx versus Powder, and given who Jinx is at her core, any hesitation becomes a wound. Beat 6, the forced trait, the scene's core. The structure becomes external survival decisions, plus relational choosing, plus identity validation. But nobody can win all three. Any solution costs someone a bond or costs Jinx a self-concept. Beat 7, the irreversible outcome. The scene ends with a decision that changes the external situation, but most importantly, it creates relational fractures, what can't be unsaid now, so her bond with Vi and Silco breaks, but in different ways, and identity consequences. This is the moment Powder truly dies. So here we see lever 1, cross-purpose inside cooperation, through Vi and Silco's mismatched agendas. Lever 2, giving the scene leverage. This is through the leverage Jinx uses and escalates in each beat, since at least externally she holds power in the scene, though not relationally. Lever 3, make at least one layer unsaid, so the subtext, and this is through Jinx's unsaid voicing of her abandonment. Lever 4, put the real fight into framing, not the topic. This is put into play as each beat escalates, and we can see Jinx's inner turmoil with both Vi and Silco by what's unsaid between the lines. Lever 5, aim resistance at the most sensitive layer. This is when Jinx targets Vi's relationship with Caitlyn. Lever 6, through the tactics ladder. Lever 7, put identity on a timer. Make them perform under pressure. This is when Jinx forces Vi's hand. Lever 8, force a trade. The win must cost another layer. And lever 9, the best scene outcome is a win-lose split. In this case, Jinx's external win is that she forces a definitive outcome. The uncertainty is gone. No more maybe Vi will come back, maybe she won't. No more ambiguous triangle. She manufactures a point where a choice has to exist right now, and the night ends with a decisive action that changes the situation permanently. Now the biggest one, Jinx's identity win, is that she gains clarity. The Powder versus Jinx question resolves into Jinx being the self that remains. It's a win in the identity ledger because her internal objective was to end the split to stop ambiguity, even if the way it happens is tragic. But overshadowing these wins are greater losses. There's a relational loss. She doesn't get the relational outcome she's actually craving. Both bonds become scars, not the safety she was hoping to gain. And there's external and relational catastrophe. She loses Silco and any possibility of the night ending with repaired trust. So in essence, it's identity win and relational loss, plus external decisive outcome outcome, and emotional devastation. And lever 10 updates these layers. Like I mentioned, these types of scenes should end with a new constraint, updating the 3 layers. The external layer is that violence ensues. Alliances and futures are permanently altered by what Jinx does next. And the relational layer, being chosen and being loved, become incompatible, and Jinx leaves with greater scars, culminating in her decision to send a bomb into Piltover's council meeting. And the identity layer changes because Jinx leaves with a more fixed self-definition, but it's born from injury, not healing. Part 6. Common mistakes. Why a scene might not translate. Mistake number 1 is that all 3 layers collapse into one. If the external, relational, and identity are basically the same want, the scene risks falling flat. The fix is to treat them as different currencies: plot, social, and self-respect. For example, the scene is that an employee asks her boss for Friday off. The collapsed layers originally are external objective, get Friday off; relational objective, get Friday off and have the boss not be mad; an identity objective, get Friday off and not feel bad. So why this falls flat? Every line points at the same objective: permission. There's no separate social negotiation and no internal safe image stake the boss can accidentally hit. The boss says yes or no and the scene's basically done. But now if you separate the layers, so the external objective keeps being get Friday off, the relational objective becomes to be seen as reliable, not disposable, and not a slacker who's always asking. And the identity objective is, I'm allowed to have a life without feeling guilty, or I'm not failing at adulthood. Now the scene has built-in pressure. The boss can block the external goal without saying no, but by implying judgment, like, again, the employee can get a day off but pay a relational price, such as losing the boss's respect, or an identity price like they feel weak or guilty. And the employee's tactics can shift because they'll try to protect being respected while still getting the day off. Mistake number 2, the identity objective is too abstract. I want to be happy won't generate moment-to-moment pressure. The fix can be done in 2 steps. First, define what happy means for the character, whether it's peace, belonging, freedom, purpose, stability, or self-respect. The definition of happiness is different for every person. Step 2, convert I want to be happy into a defendable identity claim. A defendable claim is something that can be challenged in a scene. This can be, I'm allowed to want more than survival, or if I choose myself, I'm not selfish. I'm not doomed to be miserable like everyone in my family. I'm allowed to leave what's hurting me. I can have love without earning it through suffering, or a normal life is not something I have to apologize for. This works because another character can attack them, like saying, must be nice, or since when do you get peace, or so you're just quitting, which immediately generates resistance and beats. Mistake number 3, no leverage, no pressure, no beats. If 2 characters talk and both are perfectly reasonable, nobody can force the tactics to evolve. But you can fix this by adding leverage, like a time pressure, I need the answer now; gatekeeping, I'm the only one who can approve of this; reputation, like threatening if this gets out; emotional depth, like after everything I've done for you. Without leverage, it's a discussion. With leverage, it's a negotiation. Mistake number 4, the scene ends clean. Clean endings tend to feel like placeholders. The fix is to end the new constraint in at least 2 layers. The external, like obligation created, deadline set, or resource loss. Relational, like debt, suspicion, intimacy loss, or resentment. Identity-wise, like shame, justification, resolve, or fracture, such as they get help but now they owe someone something, or they win an argument but now they're feared and not trusted. And finally, part 7, high utility exercises. Exercise A is turning a flat scene into a triangle by adding a relational objective and an identity objective. For example, take this flat premise: friend A asks for friend B to cover for them. Write out the triangle for both characters. For friend A, the asker, the external objective is to get friend B to provide the cover story. Tell them I was with you. The relational objective is to keep B on their side, to avoid being judged, to keep loyalty intact. And the identity objective is to believe that they're not a bad person, they just messed up, or they're not reckless, they're still in control of their life. And for friend B, the one being asked, the external objective is to avoid being dragged into consequences or pulled into lies. The relational objective is to be respected and not treated as a tool, or keep the friendship without being used. And the identity objective is, I'm loyal, but I'm not complicit, or I'm an honest person. Now exercise B, the cross-purpose matrix. For the 2 characters, write out where they align externally, where they clash relationally, and where they clash in identity. Taking the example from exercise A, the shared external alignment is that neither one wants A's partner or boss or parent to find out tonight. The relational clash is that A wants unconditional loyalty and no judgment, but B wants respect and honesty, so a friendship without boundaries. The identity clash is A needs to believe they're not a bad person, but B needs to believe they're not complicit or they're not someone's cover story. Now exercise C, adding pressure into the scene. From here you can add at least 2 tactical shifts caused by resistance. Beat 1, the casual ask. A's tactic is to act like it's a routine. It's no big deal. Like, if they ask, can you just say I was with you? B's resistance is to not answer the request, or they question the premise. This is a relational pushback. Like, why are you asking me that? B2 is to minimize and rush. A pressures without admitting guilt. A's tactic is to minimize and add urgency, like, it's nothing serious. I just need you to back me up if it comes up. B's resistance is an identity hit, like telling A this is you avoiding responsibility. Beat 3, bonding and loyalty appeal. A's tactic is to frame it as we're friends, like, come on, I'm not asking you to do much. You know I do it for you. B's resistance is boundary and relational correction, like, you're asking me to lie. That's not much. Beat 4, guilt, which risks relational damage. A's tactic is to make B look like the bad friend. So you're just gonna leave me hanging? B's resistance is to flip the guilt back, so identity counterattack. Like, don't do that, you're the one who got yourself here. Beat 5, an emotional leverage like confession, which creates identity cost. A's tactic is to pay the price and admit the thing that they were hiding. Like, fine, I messed up, I wasn't where I said I was. B's reaction is to soften slightly but still be guarded. Like, okay, that's different, what actually happened? Beat 6 becomes a trade and condition, a split outcome setup. So A's tactic is to offer a constrained deal to protect B. Like, just this once. If you cover for me, I'll tell them the truth tomorrow. I just need tonight. B's response is a conditional yes. It's an external win, but a relational constraint. Like, I'll do it this once, but you're telling them tomorrow, and if I get dragged into it again, I'm done. Exercise D. Write the scene with subtext. After you've done the previous exercises, try to write the whole scene without ever naming the real fight directly. It can be as simple as these 8 lines. The goal is that no one says, I feel used or I need validation. They talk about details, but it's really loyalty versus integrity. A. If they ask, just keep it simple. B. Simple for who? A. For both of us, no drama. B. You keep saying no drama right before there's drama. A. I'm handling it. B. Handling it would be what? Because this is your outsourcing it. A. I just need one night. And B says, and then what? Next time you'll just need one night again? Notice how they're talking logistics, but the real fight is about respect, trust, self-respect, and shame. Exercise E. The end ledger checklist. After drafting, write the external change, the relational change, and the identity change. If one layer is blank, the scene might not land. Here you rewrite the ending, so the win costs a different layer. In this case, the external outcome is that B covers, so A wins the external objective. The relational outcome is the friendship now has a visible boundary and resentment or unease. The identity outcome is that A got saved, but now has to live with the fact that they need saving, so shame. And B feels like the responsible one, so pride mixed with worry. And that's a split. External win, but relational and identity cost. The point of the 3-layer system is simple. A scene isn't memorable because the plot advanced. It's memorable because advancing the plot rearranges power and forces the character to either protect their self-image, betray it, or rewrite it. If you start writing triangles, you stop writing delivery scenes and start writing scenes that actually leave consequences behind, even when nobody raised their voice.